right, so we're going to continue on with floor systems here. I'm going to start introducing a little bit about how we lay them out. So first, we just need to look at this imperial measuring tape. So there we have 1 to 12 inches, gives us 1 foot, and we've got our tape laid out all the way down the line there, just a little bit past 8 feet. We'll get down there in a second once we explain it. We have to understand that we're using 8 feet. We like to call it on-center measurement, and the reason we like to go to 8 feet is so that when we cover the floor with plywood or OSB, our floor sheathing, or our subfloor we like to call it, will end halfway through a sheet. So we'll explain that a little bit when we get to the floor system in a minute. But basically I just want to go over the tape really quickly. Engineered I-joists are quite often used at what we call 19.2 on center. There's a good example of 1 foot on center. We would have 8 joists along the way to get to 8 feet. There's 16 inches on center, which also terminates at 8 feet. We can see the red squares there, or rectangles I should say. 16, 32, 48, and 64, and so on. And then another common way of spacing things to 8 feet is every 2 feet. So 2, 4, 6, 8. It all ends at 8 feet. If we look at the inches, every 12 inches, 12, 24, 36, 40, 48, 60, 72, and so on, 84, and blah, blah, blah. It always ends at 96 inches. Okay, so 96 inches is the key number here. That's 8 feet. Okay. In the days of dimensional joists, any 3 of those would work quite well depending on what kind of strength we want, or dependent on the span that we're trying to cover. Sometimes you'll see 12 inches on center on exterior decks. That way we don't get a lot of jiggling. 16 on center, very common in exterior walls at one time. More recently, we tend to stick to 24 inches on center. Engineered I-joists are often quite different than that. One of the reasons is that we are looking for optimized material and strength and performance of the floor. So what they came up with quite some time ago was to take our 8 feet, our 96 inches, and divide it by 5. Okay. One of the issues that was determined is that in 96 inches, if you divide that by 5, it's not divisible to what we like to call a nice even fraction for an imperial tape. So we work in 16ths. So we've got, let's go up to 95 here. We've got 95, 1 and 2 16ths, which we call an eighth, and 3 16ths, and 4 16ths, which we call 95 and a quarter. There's our half, which is 8 16ths, and so on. If you divide 96 times 5, you're going to get a weird number. It's 19 and a fifth, actually, of an inch. But as we just explained on the tape, we don't work in fifths. We work in 16ths and eighths and quarters and halves and that kind of thing. Okay, so what they did, let's come back to the beginning of the tape just for simplicity. What they've done is they've superimposed on the tape a different scale. It's right here, 19.2. So you can see if you look very closely, the tip of that little diamond, that black diamond, is not quite on that 3/16 mark, so 19 and 3/16. Lots of people say 19 and 3/16, and it is pretty much the same. I forget exactly how far off it is. It's like a thousandth or something, but that's not the point. The point is it is a fifth of an inch. Okay, so it's a fifth of the way from 19 to 20 in this case. We'll move on down the way, and where'd it go here? 38. And it looks like 5/8, but if you look really closely, once again, it is not. See if we can zoom in there just a little bit. There we go. We don't want to lose focus. There we go. You can see the tip of that little black diamond is not really, or 3/8, sorry, 38 and 3/8 and a little bit. Okay, and so on and so on. Come down to 4 feet. At 57. and 9/16, or actually maybe closer to 5/8, somewhere in there. But again, we're not using that scale. We're just looking at the 19.2 inches. And I've lost that guy. There it is, right by the 5 there. 76 3/4-ish. And the cool part is when you get to 96 or 8 feet, the black diamond has gone to yellow in this case, and it's right there on that 8-foot marker on the white, or on the black arrow. Okay, right there. So it lands exactly. So what they did is took 96, divided it by 5, and we've got 5 joist bases and 6 joists. So we're going to move on over to our layout here in a minute next, and we'll see how we do that and a little bit better explanation. All right, so here we go. What we have here, we have a joist at the beginning of our simulated floor here. And notice how what we've done is we've lined the tape up with the first joist. Now, there might not be a joist at the beginning, okay? We're just going to do this just for simplicity. There could be a joist with maybe a piece of rim attached to the outside to stiffen it up a little bit. But more than likely than not, there'll probably be a pony wall here, made out of 2x6 or 2x8 even is even better. But for our intents and purposes, I do hook on the beginning of those as well anyway, because this is really not factored in to our measurement this morning. We need a starting place, so we start right on the outside, okay? And then just as a side note, these are 2.5-inch cords, or flanges if you will, 2.5 inches across, and we're looking for the center of them, so it's pretty easy to find that 1.25 inches, obviously is gives us 2.5. Okay, so away we go. All right, so we're gonna hook on the end, and we come all the way down, and we hit our first little black diamond, which is 19.2. You can just see that on there. And what we've done is we've got our little our simulated joist. I don't have a lot of joist material here in the shop today, so we're just using this marker on the floor, 2.5 inches wide, and again that 1.25 inch substitution. Okay, so that's number 2. Yeah, it's our first joist there at number 2. Move along to number 3. We just come to our third, pardon me, 19.2 center, both 33 3/8 roughly, and our joist. Come along to our 4th, 57 and about 9/16 or 5/8 or so, but again we're ignoring that. We're going to 19.2. We'll come to our 5th, okay, getting close to 77 inches now at 19.2. And now we're going to get to our magic number that we wanted. We wanted 96 inches, which is 8 feet, okay, and we've got our last joist there. Now I've drawn a dotted line on this one. Reason I have is that if we had an 8-foot sheet of subfloor and we started at the very beginning, back that way, we would have it starting at the very beginning, and our sheet would land halfway through. The whole idea of that is for productivity, and so we don't waste any material by cutting sheets all the time. Okay, so we can continue on the rest of the way that way without cutting a sheet. We can just use full sheets, as long as we stay at that 19.21 center regime is what I like to call it. If we have an interruption, we'll make an adjustment, and I'll explain that here in a minute. First thing we would need to do though is we need to look at what an 8-foot sheet looks like on this scenario. All right, so I've just laid out a second tape now, just below the first tape, and what we've done is we've just pulled it out. So here's our spaces. Again, that 96 divided by 5, let's count our spaces. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 brings us to 8 feet. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. 6 joists, including the first one, and the 5 spaces. There's our 8-foot sheet, okay? So it was hooked on the beginning, comes to 8 feet. It's just a little confusing, that first tape just keeps running on there because it'll go forever. You know, it go right all the way, that's heading east, so we can go all the way to Saskatchewan and build a floor if we want to. It's a similar process we use for walls and roofs and all kinds of things that we build, and we'll explain that a little bit better, or not better, but we'll explain it a little bit differently, is what I meant to say. We won't have this silly 0.2. We'll be talking just straight 1/16 of an inch. Okay, so let's hope that works. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a look and see what happens if we have an interruption. Okay. All right, so what do we do when we have an interruption in the floor? What I'm talking about is the dreaded plumbing pipes. Okay, so there's one right there. Great big one, probably 3 inches, maybe more. That's a good example of a toilet, and according to the architectural layout, this is where a toilet needs to go. Plumbers don't like moving these drain lines, especially for toilets. People are pretty fussy about where their toilets need to be. It's nice to have them centered in the openings, in between walls and vanities and tubs and things like that in bathrooms. There's usually not a lot of real estate in a bathroom to make these types of adjustments, so it's nice to get it where it is. So what we've done is we have our 19.2 measurement, okay? There we are coming along back from that way. Everything's nice and even. We've got all these spaces. There's 96, and then we come to the next one. And our sheathing, we'd start a new sheet there once we get our floor built and keep going that way. But here's the problem. We get to 19.2, and right smack dab in the middle, we've got this pipe, okay? So what we do is we're allowed to offset these joists, okay? And in our case, and quite typically, it's not to say all floors are, we're allowed to go for a maximum 24-inch on-center offset, okay? So that's what we did here just as an example, okay? So we kind of get almost what we'd call an overspan. This is pretty much the maximum, okay? I'll just use my foot. Sometimes if the engineers tell you that your floor is too weak or you have to go past 24 inches on center, that's when we'd have to put another joist in. And we'd stick it on this side of the pipe. That would make up for the overspan or any extra load from above or something where we need to strengthen the floor. So we put another one right in here somewhere. And it's kind of up to us. They're not going to tell us exactly where to put it. We'll put it where it makes sense and try and take advantage of what's going on. Now, here's the important part, is the 19.2 spacing, we don't readjust it. So when we get to this point and we've offset this joist, we don't measure from here again. We still measure from where there would have been a joist without this interruption, the plumbing pipe. So what we're going to do is we'll go right to here. So you can see the 19.2 on center diamond on the tape, right at about 153 5/8 there. We've got our joist centered on it, okay? We'll come back this way. There's our offset joist. We're going to ignore that. There's our 19.2, 134-ish and 3/8, somewhere there. And then back to the one before. So the reason that we do that is so that as we're traveling through with our sheets of sheathing, if we get a sheet that ends here, then we just have to cut it. So what we're going to do is we'll cut it back here. We'll put it halfway through that joist. Then we'll carry on again. And because we're still using the 19.2 regime, as I move on down that way, well, we ran out of floor. I didn't build enough. But when we get back down there 8 feet away from the joint back there, we're good to go. We don't have to cut anymore. So in theory, the only time that you have to do any cutting is when we've got an interruption such as a plumbing pipe. Other interruptions, openings in the floor, change of direction, nooks and crannies and things like that, stairwell openings, those types of things will cause these types of interruptions. Because these joists, in this case, need to be moved for the plumbing. If we had a stairwell opening here, we're suiting the architectural plan, so we can't deviate that. Okay, so that's critical, okay? And it needs to be 19.2. 19 inches is not good enough. After a while, that 1/5 of an inch or that 0.2 will accumulate, and you will end up with error where the full sheets won't hit the flange of the joist satisfactory enough to the middle, and you'll be cutting every sheet on the floor, and everybody will be angry, and you'll waste material, and your boss will get mad, and all kinds of horrible things will happen. We don't want that. All right, so I think we got it all going on here. 1, 2, 3. 4, 5 takes us to our sheet. Beautiful.